If you want to know the secrets to the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. You are a powerful being that is able to communicate with the universe, source, whatever it is you want to call it, in order to advance you further along your path here on Earth. And what does advancing along your path further actually look like? It looks like experiencing more of what you actually want to experience. It looks like more of your desires being able to naturally come in from a higher level of consciousness. It looks like expanding yourself not just spiritually and mentally, but physically as well. And when you learn how to communicate with the universe properly, it's like plugging in a GPS and getting access to the universal GPS that helps you along this path, telling you the best next move to use over and over and over again. In fact, there are many tools that you already have within you that allow you to communicate with Source, the field, the all, etc., that you may just not be aware of. And so the point of this video is to help you become aware of these tools laying dormant within you, and also to activate them so you can actually get some usefulness from them in your life. We'll also be going over how these tools work, how we can use them to communicate to the universe, and of course, some actual steps you can take to make that happen. Now, why is this so useful? Because when you strengthen this communication, you will be able to know what to do next in order to further your growth and progress towards your goals and your dreams, no matter what they are. And so many people are just running around in circles in their life. They're so confused and unguided. But it doesn't need to be this way. So let's dive into how all of this works and how you can start doing it for yourself, or even go deeper with all of this, even if you're doing it already. So we first need to recognize how the universe actually communicates, because it's not communicate in the way we're communicating here or how we communicate most obviously to most people. We live in a feeling universe. Now, what that means is that it is calibrated from different levels of energy, most of which we relate to via our emotions, which simply means energy in motion. Now, this isn't to say that the universe or greater consciousness system has like morality in that sense of the word of emotions or feeling, and that's because it doesn't. But it does have a spectrum of energy that we can tap into with different consequences occurring at different points in this spectrum. Now, what does that mean? For example, if someone is always in an energy of fear, or let's call it an emotion, because to really attach it and relate it to that feeling aspect. So let's say someone is in an emotion of fear most of the time. And remember, emotion is simply energy in motion. Everything's vibrating, energy in motion. So let's say that's what they're in most of the time. There will be corresponding consequences, which is just to say results that go along and pair up with that energy of being in fear most of the time. And these results will be predictable. They will always be within a certain bandwidth of results. For example, you'll never get someone who's in that fear all the time who gets what we would consider positive results. But this works at the opposite end of the spectrum as well. Let's say instead of someone who's in fear most of the time, we have someone who's in what we call love, or we have someone who's in what's called joy. And again, not surface level joy or surface level love, like they look like they're in that and they're trying to make everyone believe that, but deep down within them, they genuinely feel these emotions, this energy in motion most of the time. Again, it works on this opposite end where if that's the case, they will get the corresponding consequences of that energy, which is at a completely different bandwidth than the one of fear, meaning different consequences, which means results will occur to the person who is communicating out that energy instead. Now, I know saying something like fear and love can mean many different things to many different people. So let's get even more specific so that we can get on the same page and help what we are going over to really sink in here. There was a researcher who had an amazing body of work. His name is David Hawkings, and he created what is known as the Hawkings Scale of consciousness, where he calibrated different levels of consciousness, their effects, how they show up in your life, the consequences of being in one or the other, and so on. Now, we are going to refer to this throughout the video so that we can organize everything we're saying here and make it very practical. And that's one of the great things about this consciousness scale. It gives us a visual, it gives us something to use and measure so we can know where we are in relationship to all of this, so we don't just say a word like love and it's this nebulous concept. We actually can follow this chart. Now let's just go over this chart very, very quickly. It's very simple. The higher up you go in the chart, in the Hawkings scale, the more power you have, which is just to say more energy. The lower down, the more force you have. When you have more power, you're actually more energy, you're more spirit, you're connecting to higher levels of consciousness. Better things, more preferable things happen higher up the scale. The lower you go down, the more physical you are becoming, the more heavy you are becoming, and usually the consequences are less than preferable. For example, guilt, shame, fear, these things are towards the bottom. Love, peace, joy, these kinds of things are closer to the top. Now, we communicate to the larger consciousness system or the universe or whatever you want to call it through these levels of consciousness and which one we are in and vibrating out most of the time. We do not communicate to the universe via words in the same way we do here. We communicate, literally are sending out communications to the universe, to the greater consciousness system about our preferences, what we would like more of, all these different things through our emotions or through the level of consciousness we are activating or dwelling in the most. So essentially, the higher up you are in this scale, the greater the results you're going to get, or the more preferable the results you're going to get. And whatever you're in any moment is what you are communicating to the universe. This is how we end up speaking to the universe. We do it through here. And I'm going to explain why words are not enough and some things you can do in order to communicate more accurately, more clearly, and with more intention, so you're actually communicating what you want to the universe, so you're getting back more of what you want, and so that you can actually do that in a very practical way. But understand that life will respond to us based on the level of consciousness we operate from. Now, we are going to go over how each of these will show up in our life, an amazing tool that we have actually been given to know where we are on this scale. We all have it. And also how to raise your level where you are bringing more of what you want into your life, because we want to make this practical, useful, and something you're actually going to get results with. So we're going to cover that too. So let's start with this tool that you've actually been given, that you are given as a spiritual being in a human body, that you just have, but you have most likely not been accessing or ignoring. So through lack of use, it has started to atrophy. However, you can never lose it, and you can build it up like a muscle once again so that it's more usable and more useful to you. Now, like we mentioned, we communicate to the universe through emotions, which simply means energy in motion. To make that a little less nebulous and a little more concrete, we can look at the consciousness scale for reference. And again, this is a massive body of work that was done over 40, 50 plus years and passes the scientific burden of proof. With 99.9% accuracy rate, they use kinesiology and other methods to confirm that this was the case. You can look into Hawking's research on your own if you want to dive more into that, if your left brain needs more of the data, but it absolutely passed the scientific burden of proof with flying colors. This is a real thing. This scale is representative of real truths and real things that occur in our natural world, and so it becomes a very useful tool because of it. So we are communicating through these emotions. Now, the universe, the greater consciousness system, does not care about the words that you use. And this is for an important reason. This is why things like affirmations and mantras will not necessarily work for someone unless there is an emotion behind the word. The reason we use words as a useful tool in order to help us create our reality or bring more of what we want into our life, for example, again, through affirmations or similar things, is because typically we can use certain words to elicit a certain emotion. But if there is no charge behind the word, if there is no energy behind that word, it is neutral and can even be detrimental. Because sometimes people will use affirmations. For example, let's just do a common one. Let's say it's financial. I am a millionaire. I am a millionaire. I am a millionaire. And so many people feel so much that they are not a millionaire that they say it. It reminds them of what they don't want, which is I'm not a millionaire, and it actually has a negative effect. And so when a lot of people say that, I'm a millionaire, or whatever the affirmation is, and they don't truly believe it, it has the opposite effect because you're now thinking of what you don't want, which is the lack of it, and now you're suddenly sending out an emotion of lack. So the emotion is the crucial component here. It is the language of the universe that's operating from an energetic perspective. And so when using words, they can be useful. They can be useful symbols that can help us tune in to an emotion, but it is about that emotion. And so even when you're using your thoughts and your words, you are doing it to elicit certain energies and emotions, hopefully that are higher on that consciousness scale. And if you're doing that, you are now suddenly creating and communicating accurately to the universe about what it is you want, instead of being unsure because you're using words that are creating emotions you don't actually want to continue to perpetuate in your life. So again, in that case, words can be useful as long as what you're saying is eliciting the emotional response that you're going for, higher up that consciousness scale, so long as it's helping you to feel in a way that is higher on that scale. Now you might be wondering, well, how do I know if I am raising up the consciousness scale? How do I know when I'm lower down on the consciousness scale, or I'm moving in a direction that's not helpful in getting me up the scale or being where I want to be emotionally? How do I know? What can I do to really know where I am and use that feedback? Well, luckily you've been given a natural tool that just came with your body, came with you as you came into this world, called your emotional guidance system. You see, your emotions are amazing guides to let you know if you're on path, moving towards higher levels of consciousness, or currently in higher levels of consciousness, or you're doing the opposite and you're moving lower down that scale, or at this very moment, lower on that scale. And so this tool will literally let you know, are you higher up on that scale or lower down on that scale? And remember, the lower you are on that scale, the more you are communicating the things you don't want to come in, and you're actually saying, I want more fear. I want more anger in my life and the things associated with that. I want more apathy. I want more guilt. I want more shame, when you're really dwelling in those lower levels of consciousness. But when you're dwelling in those higher levels of consciousness, you're now saying to the universe, you are communicating, I want more love in my life. I want more peace. Bring me more of that. That feels good. I want joy. I want wisdom. I want willingness. When you dwell in those, you are communicating to the universe, yes, please, more of that. So back to your emotional guidance system. The greater consciousness system, is always encouraging you to higher levels of consciousness. And there are reasons for it. It's because as you expand, actually the greater system expands, and there's a lot of things we can go into. But for now, just understand that the greater consciousness system actually wants you to move up the consciousness scale. It benefits as much as you benefit by doing so. And so your emotional guidance system is built in to help you to know when you are moving higher up it and when you are moving lower down it, and also what actions you can take or what thoughts you can think and other things that are going to help you to continually move up it. And it's very, very simple. Understand that the emotional guidance system, this other part of yourself that's connecting to something deeper, kind of your spirit, the essence of what you are, does not think logically. It doesn't actually think at all. It feels. And so it only operates in one of two ways. It will tell you when something is misaligned with you moving up that scale, and it will do this typically through a contraction. You will feel this. If you ever gotten a gut instinct like, ooh, you shouldn't go do that thing, that is your emotional guidance system. But on the other end of the spectrum, it will make you feel compelled to go do other things. It will make you feel excited and curious and almost pulled towards going to do other things. Think of it like your emotional guidance system giving you a red light and a green light. Green light for you should move towards that because ultimately that's going to be for your good. That's going to move you higher up the scale. That's going to help you in getting closer to the dreams you say you want to manifest, to your goals. Where the red light is basically saying, hey, this is constricting. This is going to actually stifle the progress you say you want to have. This is actually taking you further away from that which it is you are, from moving higher up that scale. This is actually moving you to the lower levels of consciousness. You will have that feeling. Now, on occasion, you can also get the equivalent of a yellow light, which basically just means wait, be patient, something will come through. But typically, you will get a yes, a green, and a lot of times that's through excitement, that's through kind of curiosity, and you've all felt that, right? You've felt how that is, where you think of something and you get excited about it, like to go do it. And you may not end up doing it. I would encourage you to start doing it, but you may not do it, but you felt that pull towards it. And other things where you're just like, ooh, something about that feels off, right? That's a very real thing, but because it's not coming through our mind and it's not coming with this logical conjecture or reasons for why we should do it, we tend to ignore it. But again, the feeling center the emotional guidance system is not going to explain it to you. It is just going to tell you green light or red light or occasionally yellow. Essentially, it is telling you whether something will expand you, and when you're moving up the consciousness scale or following that trend by staying there and doing more things at that place, you are expanding, or if something is a contraction, which is the red light or lower levels of consciousness. Your emotional guidance system will literally tell you if it's one or the other. This will expand you, this is a high choice to make, or this will contract you, this is a low choice to make. So be aware that you have that emotional guidance system which is always trying to lead you towards higher levels of consciousness. There is a reason that it's more painful when you're in the contraction. That is feedback trying to get you to move away from it and make the higher choice. And there is a reason that there is joy and excitement when you're moving towards the thing that's the green light. It is trying to encourage you in that direction because ultimately, again, the greater consciousness system actually wants you to expand. It wants you to grow your consciousness. It wants you to move higher up that scale. And so yes, it's painful and that's the feedback. It doesn't feel great. It feels contracting. It feels off when you're making choices that are at that lower end. Or if something that is calibrated at a lower level of consciousness appears in your reality, right? And you're thinking about engaging with it or whatever else, you get that contraction. Again, because it's trying to, through feedback, encourage you to make a different choice and to go towards that thing that, once again, is more that green light and is going to expand you. And again, we will cover more of how to do this towards the end of the video. I'm going to give you some actual practical tools and action steps you can take, but just be aware, first and foremost, we communicate to the universe through emotions. It's not the words. If they're empty, it means nothing. The action's the same thing as well, although actions do have more energy to them. And again, you can act from a place of different energies, right? You can act from following the red light, or you can act from following the green light. And it will make a big difference based on what you do. But ultimately, it's an emotional feeling universe. That is how it's communicating. That is the language of it. And you have an emotional guidance system that will lead you towards being able to communicate more of those things you want through going up the higher levels of consciousness versus moving away from what you are on the lower end of that consciousness scale. Now we need to go over a real core law of the universe and how it operates that I think is going to give you a bigger picture of how crucial this is. Because we look at our physical world and go, well, this is our world. This is everything that is. I have my five senses. I can see these things. I'm interacting with this physical reality that I'm in. And a lot of people think that this outer world is the predominant world. Some people think it's the only world, that there's nothing beyond the physical, that it just exists somehow out of nowhere and just is here and it just has this fine-tuned, just calculations to it and just that's it. That's the whole thing. Other people kind of are like, yeah, I understand there's something more beyond it, but it's kind of a small part of my life. But what if I was to tell you that that literal physical world, the outer world, follows something called the inner world, and that the physical world that most people believe is most of their life actually equates to 0.000001% of actuality, of reality, and that 99.999999% of reality of that which you exist in is empty space and, what we've been saying, energy, or we could say emotion, energy in motion. And so the reason I want to bring up that the outer world follows the inner world is so that you can almost take a self-audit of where are your priorities? How much attention are you giving to the inner world? Because guess what? The way to raise your consciousness is going to be going into the inner gym and doing the inner size more. And we'll get into tools. It is going to be shifting your perspective and understanding that everything in this physical world around you is simply an inner world history. It is an energetic history. It is born out of the inner world. This is why if you have someone in fear all of the time, they get things that correspond with fear in their physical. It doesn't happen the other way around. It doesn't happen that there are fear-based things in the world and then that calibrates the inner. Your environment can definitely make a difference. But if that same person was then to choose differently, and again, dwelled more in the higher levels of consciousness, I guarantee you, and I would bet any amount, that their physical environment would change because the outer world follows the inner world. It takes some time because physical stuff is more dense. Energy is more light and more instantaneous, but if you dwell in the higher levels of consciousness, the outer world will follow, and it works for every single person every single time. Here's another way that we can put it just really quick before we move on to things like tools that you can do to actually affect your life, and that is actually the idea of cause and effect. You see, you are a three-part being. We already talked about the physical, but you also have a spiritual and mental plane to your existence. You operate on all three of these planes, and for those of you watching the channel for a while, you'll recognize this, but let's go over it again, because the more repetitions of this you get, the more you'll be able to let it sink in and actually be able to use it. For those of you who are first timers, this is going to be really valuable. There's three parts of yourself. The physical is the one most people are familiar with, but the spiritual and mental is what's creating most of what's going on in the physical. You see, the physical things happening are simply effects of the causes you are creating on the spiritual and mental. If you ever heard the quote, "You become what you think about," yes, that's because what you think about will elicit certain emotions, which will then create effects on the physical. So your physical literally starts to mold itself by what you've been thinking about and feeling about most of the time. And so when you start to engage on the spiritual and mental planes as well, through some of the things I'm going to give you at the end of this video to get you started, you start creating new effects. You start actually being able to communicate to the universe. The communication is done through the inner world, through the spiritual and mental, through the images you are giving through your thoughts, what you're actually dwelling on from a thinking-based place, and the emotions, energy in motion you are entertaining or dwelling in. Again, these two go back and forth. You can certainly think of certain things that can elicit different emotions. So if you think of things that make you feel like crap and fear and apathy, well, that's not going to be too useful, except it's going to give you more of what you don't want. But you could use thoughts to also elicit emotions of love and emotions of gratitude, and vice versa. When you start just tapping into those pure emotions of gratitude and love, you start thinking about thoughts that correspond with those. And the more you start doing this from the inner world place, the more you'll start noticing the effects in the physical. But just keep in mind, like seriously, write this on the wall in your room or something, put this out there. The outer world follows the inner world. This is a law of the universe and isn't going to change probably for a very long time, if ever. So essentially, if you don't learn how to use the language of emotions not in the human sense, but emotions in what emotional signature or signal you're sending out, nothing in your life will change. And that might sound blunt, but I want to make it very clear on what's actually going to be useful here. Because if you don't do that, if you don't start just shifting your focus to going more into that inner world and doing that stuff, then nothing is going to change, because the outer world follows the inner. And so if you don't start shifting things that you're doing in the inner, it will not change the outer. Because guess what? Everything in your outer is a consequence and results, everything you have currently in the outer, of whatever you've been doing in the past in your inner. Your outer world is simply an energetic or an inner world history, an accumulation of what you have been doing in the inner world up until now. It can change only if you change what you're doing in the inner world and the energetic frequency, the energetic signal you're sending out, which is what you will use to communicate with the universe. Okay, so let's go over some tools that you can start applying to really dial this in more. And remember, when you dial this in, you start gaining access to what we call the universe GPS. This is basically your intuition really tuned in, and it will tell you what the best next move for you is, when to take a right, when to take a left. Even if you make a wrong turn, recalculating, now make a right, now make a left. And so the more you do this, the more you engage with that inner, the more you get better at this communication, the more the communication comes through that much more loudly and clearly, and you know exactly on your journey when it's time to take a left, when it's time to take a right. You're not guessing anymore, and therefore on the wrong road for years, for some people, or whole lifetimes. It will tell you literally from where you're at, where to go next. And now, how valuable is that, right? How valuable is it to know, once you get this and you're communicating with the universe or source or the greater consciousness system accurately, how great would it be if it's just like, hey, take a left here. And you're like, you sure you're not right? No, I'm telling you, take a left, right? You've been going in a circle for years. We're going to get you back on path. That's what can happen when you get this calibrated. Now, before we jump into the next tool, we do have a program where if you're really looking to commit to this and have the changes happen in as quick a time as possible, not do the guesswork, not know if you're doing it right or wrong, or have the confusion or whatever, we have a full-on coaching program that's about reality creation, that's about helping you to create the life you want in 2024. So if you're really serious about this and you don't want any more guesswork, you're tired of the pain of not knowing what to do here or it being confusing and you want a system that works, where essentially if you're willing to do the work of the system and trust the process, you will absolutely get results, then you can check out our EMF program, which I will link in the first link down below. You'll hear a little more about how it works, some of the results people have gotten, which have been insane results because this stuff just works when you know how to apply it. We're going to show you exactly how to do it over an extended period of time so that it locks this in to being a lifestyle. Not where you get little changes and little things here and there, but where your life starts becoming just a miracle, where things start just coming in ways that you would have never expected. So anyway, I'll leave it there. You can check out more information down below. There's a free video you can watch that shows you how it works and the results some people have gotten. And if it looks good to you and it calls to you and it's something that you know is going to take you to the next level, we know it, but you also on the other end of the table know it for yourself and resonate with it, you can book a call with me and we'll discuss it further. Anyway, let's jump into the tools. And the first one we have to get to, and it's so massive, and you hear me talk about it quite a bit, it's shadow work. If you have been sleeping on the shadow work, then I would really invite you to stop doing that. Because one of the most important aspects of being able to communicate with the universe properly, to move to the higher levels of consciousness, is to remove the gunk that's in the way. Most people essentially, if we look at it like a hose pipe, are trying to get into that flow, into that communication, the water coming through nicely, but their hose pipe is so gunked up that it can't come through. You know, will it help to add more length to the hose pipe? Do I need to push the water faster? No. At that point, we need to remove the gunk. And that's what shadow work is going to do for your energetic system, for your not just body or just letting go of physical stuff, but literally helping your energy system to function more effectively, which will help you with these communications. So if shadow work is something you haven't started or it's something you want to improve, then I highly recommend that you check out the video I'm going to link at the end of this one, where I'm going to go over what shadow work is if you're completely unfamiliar and give you some ways to start doing it. Now, as an added benefit for those who sign up for my EMF, I actually take them through a thing called TFT, where I'm a practitioner of this, which is one of the best ways to do it. It's a one-on-one session. I give it to all my EMF students for their commitment of signing up, but there are other things that you can do in the meantime or are very effective that I'm going to give you in that video. So again, if shadow work is something that you really feel like you need to do, you have these energetic anchors pulling you down, then go check that out, because we can just snip those anchors off. And when you have the anchors off, what happens? You naturally start to float up, and that represents naturally moving to higher levels of consciousness. So the next idea I'm going to give you is so crucial, and I'm going to give you a tool alongside this idea that synergizes well with it. And it's to understand that you are always, even if you're not doing it intentionally, sending out a communication to the universe. You're actually always in communication with the greater consciousness system. You just might not be aware of it. You might be unconsciously sending out fear energy. You might be unconsciously basically sending out all these lower conscious energies because that's what you're used to, right? So understand that you are in infinite action. There is never you not sending out a signal unless you're dead, right? So if you're not sending out a signal, then you might have moved on to whatever's next and you're no longer in a human body. Congratulations, but probably not where you want to be, right? So you're sending out this energetic frequency all of the time, and to understand this idea of infinite action. Now, the reason I mention that is because it's so crucial to wake yourself up through the day. It's so crucial to understand, where am I giving my focus and attention? What level of consciousness is this thing I'm engaging in on? What about these TV shows I'm watching? Am I on social media all the time? What level of consciousness is that? Because you are then being influenced by that and sending out that signal. And so the tool I want to give you that can help you with this is being much more aware of your mental diet. There are so many things throughout the day that we can tune into, plug into, that are calibrated at a certain level of consciousness. Everything you see around you is calibrated at a certain level of consciousness. Nothing is exempt from this. Everything in the universe calibrates at a certain frequency, and again, on that scale, at a certain level of consciousness. What do you think the news calibrates at? What do you think most sitcoms or TV shows calibrate at? What do you think most social media posts, like on TikTok, that are crazy and seem to fry your brain, what do you think they calibrate at? Now, what do you think happens when you expose yourself, especially mindlessly, when you're just passively watching it, to things at those lower levels of consciousness? It influences your signal that you're sending out because you're in infinite action. And so my invitation to you is to take a look at where you're putting your attention. What is your mental diet? Are you watching stuff like this more often than not, or are you watching, again, stuff that we can consider junk media? This is what's so great about being in a program, for example, because it gives you access to some of the best material that's energetically calibrated at a really high place, mixed with accountability, so that your infinite action and your mental diet are so calibrated that you can't help but send out an amazing signal. Most people are sending out junk signals and so getting a lot of junk back, right? So take a look at your mental diet. Again, do a self-audit. Where are you putting your attention? What videos, what things are you calibrating in? Are you getting into things like nature that would calibrate high? Or are you around people all the time that are calibrated very low, right? Are you watching TV all the time that's calibrated for the most part very low? Maybe you're consciously watching movies that you know are calibrated very high. You should look up something on Google if you want that goes over the Hawkings Scale for different movies and media. It exists, it's online, and it will tell you which movies are at high levels of consciousness, and perhaps you want to watch those ones, right? So I'm just going to leave you with that for now, right? What are you exposing yourself to as far as your mental diet? Because you can deny it if you wish, but everything you are engaging with in that way is influencing you, and it will send out that signal. And so my call is to just be aware of that and use it more intentionally. Next, please start engaging with some inner work modality. Now, there's many things out there, and I can give you some specific things, but those are what work for me in this stage of my journey, and I've also given some in other videos, to be fair. But you want to start out not trying to run, if you're new to this, to the inner size, in the same way that you wouldn't go to the gym and try and bench press 300 pounds if you've never been to the gym before. So you want to start with where you're at. And the first thing is, can you start developing an inner work practice daily and then build from there? And so this can look like a meditation. This can look like a visualization. This can look like breath work. This can look like doing certain journal prompts or activities. Find something that resonates with you. Use your emotional guidance system to find out what that thing is in this moment, and then make a practice out of it. Because when you're engaging in that meditation, guess what's happening from an infinite action standpoint? That's right, you're changing the vibration you're sending out. You're developing that inner world so that the outer world starts to reflect this new inner world, right? And so I cannot recommend enough finding, and again, it's not that hard to find, just pick one and run with it. And if you want to change after 30 days, great, but then you started developing the habit of actually doing the exercise. You go to the gym with a workout plan, you work it for 3 months and go, actually, I want to change it and do something different. Great, but now you've developed that habit of actually going to the gym for 3 months. It's much more likely you'll stick with it. It's the same with the inner size, right? So choose an inner work modality. I've given meditations and different things on this channel. If you resonate with one of them, go back, watch it again, and start doing that on a more daily basis. And I can't emphasize this enough. And yes, for some of you, it will be uncomfortable. There'll be times you don't want to do it, in the same way sometimes it happens with the gym. But if you just stick with that, you keep developing that, it will pay off, and there will be ripple effects from that in what you'll be led to next and what your emotional guidance system will lead you to from this new perspective and view you have because you've done that inner work. Now, I promised you something a little earlier in this video, and I'm going to give it to you now. It's this shadow work video. I highly recommend that you watch this because before we add certain things, or as we're adding certain things, we want to make sure we're also taking care of the shadow work. So few people put in the work to integrate their shadow, and it's why they don't get results. And I would really just don't want you to be that person. I want you to get results. So please check that out next.